Hey everybody, Jen here with Teacup Tiny Homes, and I have a great surprise for you today. And I'm going to be chatting with Rebecca Taylor, who is the Executive Officer for Tiny Home Alliance Canada. Hey, there she is. So Rebecca's just going to join the conversation here, and we'll get started. So I met Rebecca because let's see, can you find the button? Okay, so we're just waiting for Rebecca to join, and there should be something that says join here. Join the conversation. So we'll just wait and see here. Hopefully this all works out. And basically, Rebecca, she's our EO for Tiny Home Alliance Canada, which is super cool, and has been working with us for the last few months. 6 months, 8 months. Okay, sent a request to be in your video, view, go getting all set up here. Let's see, waiting. Just says we're waiting. There we go. It's happening. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
There we go, it worked. Good, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Good.
It didn't work on my tablet, so I switched to my cell phone. So let's see how this goes.
Oh, that was super fast. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks for joining today and signing up to do this. It's always nice to see your face and hear your voice.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I was just introducing you, basically, for anyone who's just hopping on now, is like Rebecca and I know each other, or we met through the Tiny Home Alliance Canada, where Rebecca is our EO, right? Is that what we call you? Executive officer?
Yeah, something along those lines. I think it changes every day.
Okay, well, we'll just use that for today.
Yeah.
But anyway, she is a huge part of Tiny Home Alliance Canada, and yeah, does a ton for the tiny home movement as far as that goes. Rebecca also has 10 years experience as a city planner, which is really kind of the focus of today. And she also lived tiny for a few months this summer. And we'll touch a little bit about that as well, hey?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So lots of different topics today. I feel like we could talk forever. So we'll see what we get through, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to post below, and we'll get to those comments as well. So Rebecca, let's see. Tell us a little bit about your experience living tiny this summer.
It was awesome. I wasn't sure because it was my first experience living tiny, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to like it or how I was going to feel, and I loved it. And it helped that it was on a boat, and I've always wanted to live on a boat. So it was a dream come true, and it was incredible. It's really tiny. I think we measured it the other day, and it's 9 feet wide by they're probably about 20 feet, maybe.
Wow.
So it's pretty small, especially the bathroom. I was like, okay, this part I'm not sure. That's definitely something when I build my own tiny house that is going to have to be bigger, because it was literally space for a toilet and a sink, and the sink did not work. So there's work to be done on the boat, but it was absolutely awesome experience. And the best news part of it is that my dog loved it, absolutely loved it. She was so happy to just hang out on the deck and just watch the people boating by on the river or whatever they were doing. She's just so chill, which is, if you know my dog, you would know that her being chill is pretty unusual.
So she was in her zen
Yeah,
space.
exactly.
Awesome. What did you like? What was, if there was one thing when you started living tiny, like, was there one thing on the boat where you're like, wow, this is so cool, or an aha moment kind of thing that you didn't really expect to have, or an experience or something like that when you went?
I think it was just that feeling. I did not at all feel closed in, and I don't know if that's partly because it was on the boat on the river, and it's quite a lot of windows. It is not well insulated because it is a boat. It is not built for 4 seasons. Yeah, it has low ceilings. It had it should feel closed in, and I didn't feel closed in at all. And I didn't really trip over the dog or anything. Like, it really didn't miss having tons of space. And my parents have a pretty reasonable sized house, and I didn't miss the space. So if anything, I felt better just being in that space, and it's nice to be in my own little space. Yeah, I was kind of surprised, I think, by how little I missed having tons of room to roam around.
Interesting. That's really neat. I kind of like a blanket. Hey, like the small space was just kind of
Yeah,
like nice and cozy, like a hug or something.
exactly. It felt very comforting.
That's so cool. So what about the tiny home movement? Like, what do you love the most about the whole movement? Obviously, you're very involved on many levels, and why?
I love it because it gives people more options. I mean, being a planner for 10 years, and I kind of fell into planning. I didn't study it in school, so I just accepted that having a minimum square footage made sense. And then when I started learning about the tiny house movement, I'm like, wait, no, it doesn't make any sense at all. Why are we doing this? So I like the fact it gives people options, it gives people freedom, and it gives people the freedom to try and be mortgage free and, you know, live life bigger rather than owning more stuff. I think that's really a really great thing to promote, because people get, you know, you get bombarded by ads and all of that kind of stuff every day, and you think that it's normal to want to just continually buy more stuff, and then you stop and you think, wait, why am I doing this? This isn't making my life better at all. It's just making my life more complicated. And I just, to me, it just is more freedom for people that they want. It's a rule in planning that really doesn't make sense to me anymore, and I think that it's great that things are starting to change.
Isn't that cool? And I felt kind of the same way. Like um, building normal sized homes. I don't know, what do we call them? Regular homes? I'm not sure. So, and I spent the last like 12 years, almost 12 years, well, I guess more than 12 years, building homes with a home builder here in Lethbridge. It was just kind of like you'd walk into a 900 square foot house and go, oh yeah, it's small. But same thing, it was a huge, like 900 square feet. Now, not that I
Yeah.
live in a tiny home, but now just being surrounded by everything tiny, designing the first tiny home that we built, it was insane because I was looking at square inches and how to utilize square inches instead of utilizing
Mhm.
square feet. And it's a total different mindset. And I know I have changed enormously about what I value and what I think necessities are now versus what it was, you know, let's say 5 years ago before tiny homes were really on my radar. So,
Yeah.
so same as you planning, you know, minimum square footage of 100 or 1,000 square feet on this lot or
Yeah.
whatever. It just made sense because that's what we were used to. So I think it's
Yeah.
so cool that there's a group just challenging the norm. And
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So anyway, besides that, as a planner, and I do have some notes down here that I'm reading, because there were some questions that I wanted to ask you, and I might probably take some notes just so that I can do a little verbiage after we're done. But
Okay.
so the challenges, what would you say as far as someone wants to live tiny legally
Mhm.
on a piece of land, wherever it may be? What are you seeing as the challenges for people in the tiny home industry?
I think the biggest challenge is the building code. So the National Building Code doesn't really cover tiny homes in a great way. Like you can go sort of tiny. I mean, I think it's like 340 square feet ends up being the minimum as per building code on a foundation, and then the minimum square footage in land use bylaws, which is just a holdover from before there were building codes. And it's just something that the easiest way to do a new land use bylaw is to take your old land use bylaw and just change the stuff you don't like, and rather than rewriting the whole thing, because it's hundreds and hundreds of pages and it's just awful. So land use bylaws don't actually change significantly even when they're a new land use bylaw. They're going to change the things that they've struggled with. For a long time, there was a movement towards like banning strip clubs, by, putting them only in heavy industrial districts, because you weren't allowed to ban them officially, but it's complicated. So those are the kind of things that have been changed, and it takes a long time. We did a new land use bylaw when I was working in Alberta, and it took at least 18 months from start to finish, and that was fast. That was really fast for a brand new land use bylaw. So I think it's the people need to be patient, I think, and it's hard when you want to go tiny. You want to do it now. You want to just be like, okay, let's do it all, let's go. And unfortunately, planners and municipal planning and land use bylaws, they don't move fast, and that's the way that it is. There's specific timing written into the requirements for passing a new land use bylaw or a land use bylaw amendment that can mean that a minimum is 3 months, and that can feel like a lifetime when you just want to move into your tiny house.
Yeah, for sure. So can you like in a quick 2-sentence definition, can you define land use bylaw, just in case anyone watching doesn't know?
Yeah, so land use bylaw is a way for municipalities to control what kind of land uses are put on a piece of property and how those land uses are developed. So is it going to be a commercial district? So in most communities, you have areas that are commercial, areas that are industrial, areas that are residential, and now people are starting to move to like mixed areas, which is a factor of sustainable development, because it means people can walk to the store. So that's the basic. It's just a way to control what and how uses go on a property.
Right, yeah. So if you're looking at things like some things that you would see in a land use bylaw are, I can't remember what all of them are, of course. So there's like RL, which is, I don't remember, for zoning, right?
So each zoning bylaw will have its own terminology and stuff like that, but generally you'll have, most typical land use bylaws these days have a number of residential districts, like a single family home district, sort of medium density, so that includes townhouses, semi-detached, maybe very small apartment buildings, and then a high density residential district, which is, depending on how big your community is, very large apartment buildings, towers, all that kind of stuff if you live in a city, or still in a small community would be a medium-sized apartment building. So they have different letters, numbers, whatever attached to them, but they all basically have the same thing. And then associated with that will be minimum square footage, setbacks.
Right. Oh, it's thinking. See if you come back here. Oh, there we go. Are you there?
Oh.
There we go. Maybe.
I'm still here.
Okay, there we go. It was just glitching out on my end. Maybe it was fine the whole time. Yeah, so that is really what both counties, small municipalities, like even if it's a little village of 500 people, they still have a land use bylaw. So that's what you always want to go check. You can call down to the county or the village office or whatever that might be, and you can ask for a copy. A lot of them are online now. If you just go to the town or municipality website, you can find that. So Rebecca, if someone does, let's say there's a really small town, we'll stick with the 500 people in it. They have a whole bunch of lots for sale and no one new has moved into the town for a really long time. And it's a good spot for a tiny home to go. What would kind of the process that someone would have to go through to see if they would be approved to put a tiny home on that piece of land?
So the first thing I would do is make sure you have a pretty reasonable idea of what you want to do. So rather than going to the municipality and saying, I want to build a tiny home, go to the municipality and say, I would like to build a tiny home on a foundation. It's going to be approximately 400 square feet. It's going to be connected to the city services, or it's going to be off the grid, or, whatever your requirements are, so that they can give you more accurate information. Because the more specific you can be, and I know not everyone's going to have exactly the details, but even just reasonable details of whether it's on a foundation or on wheels is a good start, because those things make a big difference. And then when you have those details, go to the municipality and ask to talk to somebody in the planning department. Now, in a town of 500 people, it's probably going to be also the same person who probably does like the taxes and works at the front desk, and who knows, right? And sometimes they'll have a consultant that comes in once a week, and then you should find out when that consultant comes in, because you want to talk to somebody who is knowledgeable about planning in that community. And somebody who has an idea of how council feels about different types of development and stuff like that. So a planner, a planning technician, somebody like that is who you're going to want to talk to. Even if it is a really small community, they should have somebody who has a title along those lines. And then you would explain to the planner what you want to do and ask them, is this something that will work in your community? And if it's not, how do I go about making it possible? And speaking from somebody who was a planner for a long time, the more, if you can, ask them for advice, especially if there's somebody who's interested, and you can usually tell if they're like, oh, that sounds really cool. However, there are going to be these issues. Or if they just say no, then obviously you've got bigger issues to deal with if they just say no and walk away. But if they're interested, and if they will help. I would talk to people and I say, okay, the way you want it isn't going to work in this way. These are your options. You can tweak your plan a little bit. You can do a minor variance, which is sort of slightly tweaking a bylaw. And most bylaws will give you a range as to how far you can tweak a bylaw without doing a big amendment. Or you're going to have to do a great big bylaw amendment, which will take time. So a lot of planners will help, and they will say, these are the different options that you have, especially if you ask them. If you go to them with an open mind, I think that helps a lot, because it might be that they have already looked at it. Affordable housing, attainable housing is a huge issue across Canada now for communities big and small. And there is a mandate for many municipalities to have a sustainable development plan or sustainability requirements in their municipal development, like their overarching plan for their community. And those requirements will help when you're talking to them about tiny homes, because they fall into sustainability and they fall into affordable housing. So it's a good situation. So those are the things you'd want to talk to them about. The cost will vary wildly. I mean, in the city of Ottawa, it's probably going to be thousands of dollars to do anything. In a small community, it might be $100 or $500. But there is going to be a cost associated with it. Unfortunately, that's just the way that life works. But they will tell you. They'll tell you how much it will cost, and give you an idea of what you're getting yourself into, and timing, and all of those kind of things. So just go with an open mind.
Yeah, I guess a key thing for people to know is that if you just go in and say, hey, can I put a tiny home on this piece of land? Mm-hmm. There's going to be more work than that. I don't think you're going to get a straight yes, period. And your first point of contact, they probably really aren't going to be the ones that are going to make that decision. So no. Let's say that you go in and then you kind of work through some kinks, and they say, okay, maybe, but what are some things that have to happen? So we have someone that thinks it might be okay, and you talked about a variance and applying for a variance. So in my background, I guess, if you apply for a development permit, right, or something like that, you have to own the piece of land that you have. But a lot of people don't want to buy the piece of land without knowing if they can or cannot put a tiny home on it.
Yeah, and one way you can get around that is if you're buying if you've made an offer, or you know the person you're buying the land for, or you're going to rent the land from somebody, then get them on your side, ask them, say, this is what I want to do. Will you go to the municipality with me and sign off on these documents? Because it's the landowner. So you can still apply. You can make that a condition of your sale. If you are buying a piece of land, you say, I will buy this piece of land conditional upon the fact of getting approval for what I want to do. That's definitely something that they don't have to accept it, but you can definitely ask for that to be a condition of the sale. And then and that's fine. That's something that happens quite often, and shouldn't be a big
that's
hurdle.
A good point. Because obviously, if they want to sell you the land, like if there's a sale and they think it's going to go through, then they're going to want to help you out so that they can sell you the land, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So anyone who's watching right now, I just want to reintroduce you. This is Rebecca, and she's in Ottawa. She and I are on the Tiny Home Alliance Canada together, and that's how we know each other, but she also has 10 years in city planning. So that's why we're chatting today, talking about how you can go about some of the ins and outs of getting a tiny home legally instead of having to park out in the wooded back 40 and hide from everybody. So that's kind of what we're talking about now and just some of the different scenarios. So say you're presenting your whole plan to the municipality and you have everything, you're ready to go in, you've kind of got a yes, and you have to, I guess, present a parcel or I don't know, a presentation to the municipality. What would you say are some key things that you should have together that are really going to help you prove that this is a good idea?
I would say, talking about sustainable development, like read their, and it sounds awful and it is going to be awful, but read the bylaws. Read the bylaws, and if you don't understand what they mean, because sometimes the lingo is pretty obscure, then ask somebody to help you. There are planners everywhere. If they have a sustainability mandate, if they have an affordable housing mandate, those are things that you can talk about, because it's very specific to tiny homes that they're sustainable just because they're tiny. The smaller the home, the more sustainable it is, because it's less hard surfaces. I mean, obviously, if you're going to buy a piece of property, put a tiny home on it, and then pave the rest of the property, that's not sustainable. But I don't know too many tiny home people that want to do that. So it definitely falls into a lot of sustainability mandates. And then talk to them, talk to your councillors, talk to the mayor, and explain to them and show them information. A lot of concerns around tiny homes is that they're going to end up being abandoned, or they're not going to get taxes or stuff like that. The taxes thing can be resolved, especially in Alberta, where modular homes and mobile homes and those kind of things are common. The modular home is taxed separately from the land, so you can go to them and explain this is something that can be dealt with. It's not something completely out of the realm of taxation, because they are concerned. That's how they pay for your roads and your water and your sewer and your ice rink in the winter, or whatever your community has. That's how they pay for things. And your taxation on a tiny home is not going to be very much money. I know it sucks, but it does help the community survive. And if you like that community, then paying taxes is just your way to do things.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's going to help. I mean, it helps everything. So it's kind of all about, I find, like getting along too.
Yes.
Get along with your neighbors, get along with the municipality. Don't go in thinking, screw you guys, I'm going to do what I want, because you're going to get nowhere. You need to work.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and a lot of planners now are aware of tiny homes, and the tiny home movement is becoming more and more popular, and they are interested in it. I've been to communities where they think this is really cool, but they maybe their council has some reservations, maybe they're not exactly sure how to do things. So work with them, and and reach out to Tiny Home Alliance Canada to ask for help, or whatever you need to do to get that information, so that you can go to them with all the benefits of a tiny home and try and help ease their concerns, because that's going to be huge. They'll be like, oh, okay, well, that sounds really cool. And it might not work. There is no guarantee. You might go to a place and they'll just be like, no, we're not doing this. This is we don't want that. And there might be nothing you can do to make them change their minds and wait for another election. I don't know. But yeah, exactly. Get out and vote, and or look at other local communities. One municipality may say no, and the one next door might say, yeah, this is an awesome opportunity. We'll help you, and then we'll look at doing it for the rest of our community or something. You never know what's going to happen. So, but definitely going and asking for help and being open-minded and being willing to maybe make some concessions is a huge way to get, to work with a municipality, because they're people.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I think one of the concerns too is, well, there's a few different concerns I think too for municipalities. One, they don't want squatters, of course, because that's just not good for neighborhoods, right? Mm-hmm. I think another thing is, I guess if it's low income housing, again, depending on where the zoning is and whatever else, if you're in a community where there are $1 million homes or greater, right, you're not going to be able to put a tiny home in there. It's about property values, and it's also about respecting the neighbors. I think what we find too is that, like Calgary, for example, they're just a no. Like, it just seems like they don't want to budge on this right now, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. Edmonton is a lot more open, right? So they're looking, thanks, Steph. I'm just reading the comments below. Keep kicking ass every day. So if, if you look at Edmonton and they're more open to it, they're looking at laneway housing and that sort of thing. I know here in Lethbridge, just recently, some of the councillors, they reached out, or a councillor reached out to me. I have talked to a few of them over the years, and they're very interested as well as I drop everything. And so we'll actually be meeting with them to discuss more too. And I mean, it is something that's pretty good, but again, it is community by community, and it is parcel to parcel. Like, it may not work on this space, but even in the same municipality, it may work in a different space. So I think that's where you really have to talk.
Yeah, and another good thing to do is, if you do get to the point where you're doing, you do get a maybe yes from a municipality, go to the neighbors of the area where you want to put your tiny home and talk to them and explain. Like, almost every development is actually going to improve the value of your property. Putting a tiny, especially, the tiny homes that are being built these days, which are gorgeous, putting a tiny home on a small piece of land in somebody's backyard is very unlikely to bring down the surrounding property values. It just doesn't, that's just not how it works for property assessment. Almost always it's going to increase the property value, or it's going to stay the same. The things that bring down property values are like a vacant land is one, especially, or like rundown, a large number of rundown homes. But if you're looking at a neighborhood that's, a mixture of like single family homes, semi-detached, little apartment building, something like that. Often in small communities, that's the historic neighborhood. Those are really good spots because they already have a big mixture of development. And those people are used to having all these different developments around them. So it's not going to be as big a deal. But go to the neighbors and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Here's the plan. This is what I want to, this is what it's going to look like. All of those things to try and get them on your side, if you can, because they have say. They do, if you do a minor variance, if you do a land use bylaw amendment, they have say. They can go to the planning committee, they can go to council and say, hey, I don't like because of X, Y, and Z. But if you've already gone to them and explained what's going on, then they're a lot likely to do that. And they might even go to those council meetings and say, yeah, I think this is a great idea. And that's amazing. If that happens, that's just the best thing ever, because that happens so rarely. So that's a really good thing to do, is to try and, you know, win over the neighbors. And I'm you know, just try and ease their fears.
Yeah, bribe your neighbors with pleasant gifts, and then have them write a letter of recommendation to you. Okay, I hear some weird noises going on. I don't know if it's on my side or your side. Sounds like a phone vibrating.
Oh, that was my phone vibrating a little bit.
Oh, is it yours? Okay. So I think this is awesome. And one thing too, where you're saying that it's not going to drive down the property value, because I know in Okotoks, Thomas from Vagabond Tiny Home, he did a lot of work trying to get a planned tiny home community in Okotoks. And I believe that, you know, the people in the town, in the area, they weren't too keen on it because they were worried that it was going to drive down their property values and that it wasn't going to be good for their community. So, which is really too bad. And I do think that's an interesting point, and maybe it's more of a topic for later too. Or if you remember what those 4 things are that bring property values down, I'd like to make a note on those, because that would be a good thing to kind of go talk to neighbors about. Say, you know, this is going to increase it. Especially, say, if there's a vacant home sitting on a lot that's condemned or something like that.
Yeah.
If you can do something on that piece of property instead, that would be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and for the sake of time, like I said, I knew that we would be able to talk forever about this, because we're both kind of tiny house obsessed. But is there anything else that you think would be of huge value to viewers to note today?
Well, I will tell you one thing. You do not need a permit to live on a boat.
You don't need a permit to live on a boat.
You don't need a permit. So if you're at a marina, if you're like moored out in the middle of a lake, you're fine. You live there as long as you want, because there are no rules about that generally. So that's really good news. So if you want to live tiny and your municipality says no,
for that, because we have a river and a lake. Okay, nobody in Lethbridge. You can't just go live on a boat in Henderson Lake. Okay. That just probably won't do. Henderson Lake is like our little man-made lake that has a nice walking path that goes around it. So
yeah. They might frown on that if it's just a little lake, but on the river by a marina, very good.
Yeah. Anyway, well, Rebecca, this has been a pleasure for sure, and we should maybe do it again in the future. Because I know that you are a wealth of information. And you sure do help us out a ton at Tiny Home Alliance Canada. So some plugs here. If you do want some more information, Tiny Home Alliance Canada, check out the website. We have a private Facebook group for members only. And we are looking for more members, especially to join our committees that are going to be moving forward with government bylaws. Let's see, what else? Building code.
Yeah, that's engagement. Just spreading the word.
Membership awareness, all these things. So we're working on that. And also, if you do have any questions, we will be posting this on our Facebook page as well. So you can check out the replay there. And feel free to comment below, and we'll make sure that if there's anything that Rebecca can answer, that we get it over to her as well. So yeah, with that, thank you so much again.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, that's so great. And for anyone watching, like I said, comment your posts, and I guess that'll be it for the day.
Awesome. Well, you have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks again, Rebecca. Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, bye.